Let's talk to Paul Embery, though, trade unionist and writer, because there's been some trouble over in Northern Ireland, which has been, going on, I suppose, for most of this week. It's a sort of a riot which is going on nightly, where people are getting houses getting burnt down, and community centres getting burned down. It's all because of two teenagers who've been arrested, supposedly for charged with a sexual assault of a teenager, or another teenager, and they're all from Romania, and so the locals have taken it upon themselves to demonstrate, basically. And there was also a bit of trouble in Salford last night, so we thought we should ask Paul what he made of it all. Paul, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
Thanks very much for joining us. I mean, there's a lot of people worried about what might come this summer in terms of, a kind of summer of discontent. We're going to have the hottest day of the year, I think, so far today in the southeast. It's going to, the combination of sort of hot weather, police not exactly being the most loved people in the world at the moment, and a lot of sort of what you might call youth who haven't got much better to do.
Yeah, and I think the first thing to say is, look, some of the violence has been appalling and indefensible and mindless. And from some of the scenes that I've seen in Ballymena of innocent people having their property set on fire, some of the perpetrators deserve to go to jail, in my view, for a very long time. So it's important to make that clear. But I think beyond that, it's certainly true that there is a great deal of simmering tension out there, whether it's in Northern Ireland, whether it's in some of the provinces of Britain, what you might call some of our post-industrial areas. And much of that tension is not driven by racism or by any kind of desire to commit mindless violence. It comes about because people in many of those communities, some of our tougher, grittier communities, feel genuinely that the country is broken, that the country isn't working for them, that the economy is broken. They can't get on the housing ladder, public services are crumbling, real wages are falling, the government, successive governments have lost control of borders, we've got real problems over integration in our communities, massive cultural transformation, and that is not going to go away, and I feel that resentment is going to build and build.
Yeah, I feel that there's a sense, a bit like the 1970s, when you might not remember them as well as I do, but there were some similar kind of problems then. But people have said to me, back then, yeah, there were problems, but we didn't have the sort of the multicultural problem that we have now. And you do get a sense that people are getting more and more fed up with it, like with every passing day.
Well, I sense that there is a real phenomenon in our country of social disintegration going on, where actually, we have politicians constantly tell us how united we are, constantly tell us that diversity is our strength. And it's pretty clear if you ever go to some of these, particularly these working class communities beyond the M25, you see really how unintegrated we are. And I'm not suggesting that these communities are necessarily at each other's throats all the time, but they rarely interact. And I think social solidarity, which is, very important aspects of a high trust society, is slowly eroding. And my fear, Mike, is that we end up becoming something like Lebanon. We see the slow Lebanonization of our country, where a previously stable and secure country becomes divided upon ethnic, religious and cultural lines, with each community almost retreating, to itself. And people not interacting. We are disintegrating in that way. And I don't say that process is going to happen overnight, but I think there's a sense that it is slowly happening, and it's really not healthy.
And do you really think it's that serious?
I don't necessarily say that communities are powder kegs that are just waiting to erupt. I just think there is a simmering resentment, and unless the government very quickly gets growth into the economy so people start feeling better off, unless they show that they've got a strategy for integrating the very large numbers of people that have come here, which successive governments have been dreadful at, unless they show that they can get immigration numbers sharply reduced, unless they've got a strategy for rebuilding some of the social solidarity that has been lost, and getting public services working, reducing NHS housing waiting lists, getting the housing crisis sorted. then I don't see how that resentment is going to go away. Professor David Betts, you know, an esteemed professor in modern war, has suggested that he thinks that we're on the way to civil war in this country in some, because a previously dominant social majority, as he describes it, feels like it's losing its place in society. And we've got this thing called asymmetrical multiculturalism, where, if you like, the native population are told to suppress and never celebrate their own culture, but are told they constantly have to celebrate other cultures. Now, I don't necessarily say it's as serious as that, but I do think that there is a real divide in our country, which is not closing, and is, I think, slowly getting worse. I think most people can see that.
I think most people can see it, and that's what is worrying to people. And also, you know, this business that came out earlier this week about Angela Rayner decriminalising being homeless. You know, at first glance, people thought, is that something to do with, you know, not arresting people who are, you know, who are vagrants and causing problems and all that? But lots of people have interpreted it as this could basically make it possible for a lot of tented cities to grow up, and these might be tented cities full of all manner of people, including some of the people that we now see camping out in the middle of London. You know, in the middle of Park Lane, you've got like a tented city of a sort of Roma community who spend most of their days begging on the streets of London and then go and sleep under tents in the middle of a road.
Well, look, I mean, I think homelessness is a real problem in our society, and, you know, it tugs on my heartstrings whenever I see somebody sleeping rough, particularly.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that in parts of America, for example, in California, in Los Angeles, particularly in New York, and a lot of the Democrat-controlled cities, there are so many homeless people that they've literally taken over streets, you know?
Yeah, and I get that, and it's not a pleasant thing to experience. It's not a pleasant thing when that happens to, you know, to the community that you're in. And I understand completely that people say, look, this shouldn't be allowed. There needs to be a proper strategy for making sure that everybody has got a roof over their head. And I'm not particularly in favour of what Rayner is trying to do. I don't think that's necessarily going to address the question. I think more widely, there is a general sense that there is a growing lawlessness on our streets, whether it's begging, whether it's petty crime, whether it's people evading their fares on public transport, and that the police and the courts are just not addressing that. They're not deterring crime, they're not punishing it. And, you know, you saw Robert Jenrick's video where he highlighted a phenomenon that those of us who have lived and worked in London for many years will know exactly that this sort of thing is going on, and the authorities largely turn a blind eye to it. And I think that's you know, I think there's a sense among people that the police and the courts have got their priorities all wrong, and they often concentrate on things like people putting offensive words online. They devote a lot of resources to that, whereas the real crime that blights our communities and affects people's lives, they are pretty useless at dealing with.
Well, they are, and we get this morning a piece in the Times saying that their funding shortfall is going to force them to go soft on theft. And I mean, I couldn't quite believe my eyes when I was reading this. They say they're going to have they're going to have sort of less priorities on things like shoplifting and phone theft. There'll be fewer officers patrolling parks and attending schools. Well, you know, I can't remember the last time the police actually tried to catch anybody who stole a phone. 1,000 phones are getting stolen a week in London. I think maybe 2,000 now. And also shoplifting has become something that if you can't stop shoplifters in your own shop, then the police aren't going to help you.
And, you know, criminals are not stupid. They might be immoral, but they're not necessarily stupid. They know, in most cases, that they will get away with it, even if they're filmed online and it's put on social media. Most of the time, they know that the shop staff, if they're shoplifting, or the station assistants, if they're evading their fare, are not going to lay a finger on them and are not going to apprehend them. And even if they are caught by the police, in the unlikely event, they're probably never going to see a court, and they're probably not going to be punished in any serious way. And what that does, it provides an incentive to just do more and more. And I'm a believer that in the kind of zero tolerance approach, if you nip it in the bud very quickly and you punish very quickly, I believe people should be given second chances in life, but if you punish quickly, you're then disincentivizing people from doing the same thing again. But in our country, unfortunately, that's not happening. They just get away with it time.
And also the problem with the prisons, I mean, we could talk about this all day, Paul. I mean, I know you've probably got to go and do something else, but you know, the prison system is constructed in such a way that you're very unlikely to go to prison, even if you do get caught by the police for doing something that they're very unlikely to catch you for doing. The chances of you going to prison are practically zero.
Yeah, and again, the same thing. Criminals understand that. They know that you will have to essentially turn into a habitual criminal before you see the inside of a prison cell. And by that point, it's almost ingrained in you. And, you know, as I say, if we had a system, a sensible system where the state intervened swiftly and forcefully, and I'm not, as I say, I'm not a hang 'em and flog 'em person. I believe that people should be given second chances in life, but you need to disincentivize people from believing that they can simply continue to commit crime and get away with it, and it will be, you know, their 15th, 16th, 17th offence before anybody intervenes, or before they're ever likely to see the inside of a prison cell. By then, they are regular criminals, and it's very difficult to shake them from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Paul, good to see you. Thanks very much indeed. Paul Embery, trade unionist and writer, talking about his worries about the way that Britain is actually going.